Welcome to Between the Sheets, the non-judgmental podcast where we're going to cover various sexual health and wellness topics. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Zwonitzer. I'm a urology and sexual health nurse practitioner, and I love helping my patients and listeners discover and develop their most satisfying sexual experiences. Between the Sheets is here to normalize the conversations about sexual health and cover everything from basic anatomy to the most taboo topics and everything in between. Real talk, real pleasure, one episode at a time. So come on, let's get between the sheets. This episode is sponsored by Boston Scientific and its educational website on erectile dysfunction, edcure.com. One study estimated that more than 50% of men over the age of 40 have some degree of erectile dysfunction, which can be frustrating and confusing. Go to edcure.com to find information on erectile dysfunction and treatment options, including long-term treatment options offered by Boston Scientific. Boston Scientific does not endorse any statements or opinions expressed during this episode. Hey, welcome back to Between the Sheets. We're going to have a fun conversation today with our guest, Eve Hall. She is the host of the Please Me podcast, where she covers all kinds of sexual health topics, and it is now rated number 1. Yes! And then she is also a physical therapist, a powerful voice in the sexual health world, promoting the shame-free conversations and destigmatization of all these sex conversations. So I'm really excited to have Eve here today, and we're going to talk about some taboo topics here too.
I'm excited to have this conversation with you, Stephanie. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll plug the podcast again at the end and, of course, put everything in the show notes for you guys. So Eve, how did you get into the sexual wellness world? Because we all kind of have a story as to how we got this. We didn't go to kindergarten and say, I want to be in sexual health when I grow up.
That's very true. Actually, I am a licensed physical therapist, and I have been a physical therapist for over 20 years. It seems to have gone by in the blink of an eye, and I've sort of cycled in and out of different specialties. My biggest specialty was pediatrics, believe it or not. And when I moved to Florida, pediatric jobs were few and far between. And so I did a lot of geriatrics, and then COVID hit, right? And I decided to start my own practice. And during the move from up north to Florida, I also transitioned in a big way because I got divorced. And so when I got here, I entered into my own sort of sexual liberation and my path and my journey on my own sexual liberation, I'll say. And during that time, I became very interested in sexual health and on treating conditions like erectile dysfunction, painful sex, etc. And so I decided to specialize in the pelvic floor. And so the pelvic floor is, the medical term, but, I worked with peds for many years. And one of the biggest things that I learned as a pediatric physical therapist was that we needed to really explain things in layman's terms. And so pelvic health is just not a sexy term. Most people don't even know where their pelvic floor is or what it is. And so I decided to say that my practice helps people with their sexual health. And really, the pelvic floor is the foundation for all sexual health. And so that's sort of how I entered into treating sexual health conditions, because I was just more interested in sexual health myself. And then I started the podcast to talk more about sexual health and sexuality in general.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I similarly went through a divorce and explored things myself. And that was really when I got into kind of the sexual side of medicine and, practicing urology. It's easy to get into that side of things. And so, yeah, I love that story for you and that you've been able to evolve this. And I also love that you specialize in the pelvic floor, because that's one of my favorite things, is to send patients to pelvic floor physical therapy, whether they're coming in for pain with sex, leaking urine, erection issues, pelvic pain issues, men or women, post-cancer treatments, all these things. That pelvic floor physical therapy is just so amazing at helping these issues. So I just genuinely appreciate your work in that world as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, you're absolutely right. And so many people don't understand or know about the pelvic
Hmm.
floor, which is why I try to keep it in layman's terms and say sexual health. But
Yeah.
absolutely, it is such an important area of health. And it really can make a huge difference if you focus on trying to get stronger in that area. Because, just like any other muscles, the pelvic floor is composed of muscles and can be strengthened. So you can improve your sexual health by improving your pelvic floor health.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the other areas that you kind of are making a push to get the conversation out there about is the orgasm gap.
Yes,
I love that you like that because it is so profound. And I don't think many people really consider that as an actual issue or even understand how significant of an issue that is.
it really is such an enormous issue for women. And, all heterosexual relationships, there exists an orgasm gap when you look at the
Mhm.
statistics, right? From hookups all the way to marriage and every
Mhm.
relationship in between. We're not talking about the orgasm gap, but a lot of us experience it. So
Mhm.
when I read the book Becoming Cliterate and I found all of these incredible statistics around the orgasm gap, I knew that this was something that I really wanted to talk about because the orgasm gap exists because we don't have the proper education. We're not empowered to make a change. And so, if through education and through empowerment, we can really change the orgasm gap for ourselves, one person at a time with
Mhm.
the knowledge that they need. And so, yes, the orgasm gap is something that exists, but it doesn't have to. If you're
Mhm.
experiencing that in a relationship, and I know that when I look back at my prior relationships, right, and I think about how many times I orgasmed versus how many times they orgasmed or he orgasmed, I can tell you that there was an orgasm gap that existed in my previous relationships. And when I
Mhm.
heard that it was a thing, right?
Right.
And this was a very common experience for women, I was like, well, we need to start talking about this and like talking about it all the time. Because
Yeah.
really, the orgasm gap is a phenomenon that is very pervasive. However, it can be changed through education.
Yes, absolutely. So, for listeners who are not aware of what the orgasm gap is, do you want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is the phenomenon where men are having more orgasms than women are having. And
Mhm.
like I said, it goes across the board, all the way from hookups, all the way to marriage. And,
Mhm.
the numbers go down as you get to know your partner more. But even still, in long term
Mhm.
relationships and long term marriages, many women are experiencing less orgasms and their partners are not. And so
Yeah.
that is what the orgasm gap is.
Yeah, and so specifically for hookups, I don't you might remember off the top of your head better than I do, but it's something like men orgasm 80 to 90% of the time with a hookup and women are like 20 or 30% of the time.
Yeah,
I
it's a
mean, it's
huge, huge
drastic.
gap. It's not like 5%. No, this is
Yeah.
massive gaps. And even still in long term relationships, there are
Mhm.
massive gaps as well. It's a
Mhm.
huge gap. And it's a pity because women are not talking about it. We're not
Mhm.
having these conversations about how we're not being satisfied. And so, no wonder there's a lot of people in long term relationships that really don't want it anymore, don't want to have
Yeah.
intimacy anymore with their partners, and it becomes an issue. It doesn't have to be.
Right. Right. And it's interesting because it is multifaceted, especially when you take apart the various relationships. For a hookup, women, we need the emotional connection more than men do. We need to have more time, usually. Different things. We know what works for us, but we're not really comfortable enough with this person to have that conversation. So there's a gap there, right? And then as we're in longer term relationships, a lot of us were raised that sex is for the man or to make babies. And that's it. We weren't raised in a world and in a culture where pleasure is the main focus of sex and that women's pleasure matters as much as men's. So a lot of times we do have, even outside of your physical ability to reach orgasm, we have this gap of, well, he got his and we don't have to worry about hers because pleasure is for the men. And so I think there's multiple levels of the orgasm gap that we could really break it down into.
100%. You know, societally, and you're talking about like purity culture here, right? A
Mhm.
lot of
Yep.
times women are taught that, you know, they're there for their husband's pleasure, but not
Mhm.
necessarily for their own. And
Yep.
that's a bunch of hogwash, right?
Yes.
we we have the same ability to have pleasure as a man does. And
Mhm.
one of the statistics, and I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but one of the statistics in that book was masturbation, right? And
Mhm.
how long it takes a woman to masturbate and reach orgasm, and how long it takes a man to masturbate and reach
Yeah.
orgasm. And really, the numbers were almost essentially the same. So, women can orgasm just as easily as men do, but we don't because we're not telling our partners what we want, what
Mhm.
we need, and what turns us on. And if we're not having these conversations, we will never close the orgasm gap for
Mhm.
ourselves.
Yeah, and just learning, women masturbate at a lesser rate, frequency than men do because again, we weren't told that our pleasure matters. We weren't told that you should know your body better than anyone else. You should know what works for you before you're even engaging with someone else because your pleasure matters. And so, yeah, we might be able to if we're both masturbating oranges to oranges, but these women are masturbating at such a lower rate and less frequent than men to begin with. So it's like, man, we really just need to push women to enjoy yourself and make sure that you're letting your partner know how to enjoy you so you can get your pleasure as well.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, shame comes into this here, you know, and a lot of women were taught that it's shameful to touch yourself,
Mhm.
and it's not. It's a normal and natural exploration of your body. And
Mhm.
masturbation is so essential because we need to know how we can get there on our own. That's the only way that we can translate that information to the bedroom. And so if you've
Mhm.
never had an orgasm on your own and masturbated and came on your own, it's going to be very, very unlikely that you're able to do that with a partner.
Yeah.
And, you know, like you mentioned before, women need 20 to 25 minutes of warm up before they're even ready for penetrative sex.
Mhm.
And a lot of times, you know, many steps are jumped ahead,
Mhm.
and we're jumping into the penetration way before we're ready. And so that can cause things like painful sex, right? And
Mhm.
we don't want to experience painful sex. And so we may not want sex anymore or less
Yeah.
frequently because we're experiencing painful sex. Women need to understand that their bodies take longer to get turned on
Mm.
and ask for that. Ask for
Yeah.
what you need, touching,
Yeah.
kissing, whatever that may be. And I love to say that our entire bodies are an erogenous zone, not
Mm.
just our genitals, right? If,
Yep.
you know, you are perceiving the touch that you're receiving as sensual, then the part of your brain that lights up is the clitoral area of your brain. You are perceiving it as sexual or sensual touch. So exploring your entire body is really, really
Mhm.
important as well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think some of the foreplay can start before you're even together. Text each other while you're at work. Get things going that way mentally, like you were bringing up. You're getting there. You're getting those erogenous zones warmed up. You're getting ready for that actual physical touch and contact. But you can start that hours before you're in the bedroom.
100%. I think foreplay is so, so important for women,
Hmm.
not just physically, because women's bodies are very interesting. Our vaginas kind of close in on themselves, right?
Hmm.
When we're just like regularly doing our, you know, day-to-day activities. But when we
Hmm.
get prepared mentally for sex, our vaginas actually elongate and to allow for that penetration to occur. And if you're not giving yourself the time to really get to that point where your vagina's elongating and getting ready for penetrative sex, you're going to have issues. And so yes, absolutely foreplay is absolutely essential. It does not have to start right when you lay down. You can definitely
Hmm.
be texting, calling, sending messages to one another, you know, that little kiss on the back of the neck with the little
Hmm.
message of I need you later or something, you know,
Yep.
really continuing to develop that intimate relationship with your partner so that you can really get excited about the time that you're going to spend together. And I often say that it's important to schedule the time. And I know that a lot of people think that that's sort of unsexy, but
Yeah.
really, you know, with our busy lives, it's really hard to get to the point where both partners are ready mentally for sex. And when you
Mhm.
plan it ahead of time, you are looking forward to that time together, and you're looking forward to all of the, things that you've been discussing and talking about
Mhm.
throughout the day or throughout the week, whatever that may be. And so it really mentally prepares you for that moment. So I think that scheduling sex is one of the best things that people can do.
Yeah, I'm all for it as well. I think it's such an important thing. And really, if you think back to, early dating, things like that, like you did have planned sex. It might not have sounded like that, but
Right.
you didn't see each other for 3 days. You knew you were going out to dinner on Thursday night. You were spending the night together. That was your planned sex. And so just because you live together and now you're taking the time to plan sex, that's okay. You used to do it too. And now, like, I love taking an everything shower on a day if I know I'm going to have sex. I want to shave everything. I want to, make sure my hair is washed and that's part of, for me, getting turned on in that arousal phase and all of those things. Even if my shower's 6 hours ahead of date night, it still is just getting me in that mood and that mindset that today itself is sexy, not just that 1 hour of my day. The whole day is sexy. And I think that it allows you to have more conversations with your partner, which is another huge part of staying connected, being open to trying different things with each other, pleasing each other correctly. Those conversations can be ongoing because all day long that tonight's the night.
And they should be ongoing. You should be having
Mhm.
open communication with your partner about sex, about
Yeah.
intimacy, about sexuality, about sensuality, about what turns
Mhm.
you on. All of these things are so, so important for us to do. And a lot of times people are too embarrassed to even say two words about it,
Yeah.
And so practice makes perfect. The first
Yep.
conversation is certainly uncomfortable,
Mhm.
awkward, but the second one, the third one, and the fourth one get easier and easier as you go. And eventually you will be chatting up a storm about something that you never thought you could speak about before. So practice makes
Mhm.
perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. I had one of my patients listen to a previous episode in his most recent visit with me. He's like, I listened to one of your episodes. You said date night starts the morning of. And he's like, we texted each other throughout the day. I remembered to stop on the way home and grab some flowers. And he's like, we had one of our best nights ever. It was great. And it was because they were both so mentally into it by the time they even saw each other because they'd been connecting throughout the day. And that's just awesome. And the other thing, I think about with planned sex is I deal with, and as well as you, a lot of my erection guys that have issues having erectile dysfunction. It gives them time to take their medicine if they have to get their mindset in the right place and do their exercises and things like that ahead of time so that they can perform at their best as well. So I'm a huge fan of scheduled sex.
Yes, absolutely. Me too. And erectile dysfunction is one of those things that can be a real mind game, right? And,
Hmm.
having to perform for men can be really scary and cause anxiety. So,
Yeah.
learning how to, decrease that anxiety, decrease that stress, and really put the focus on pleasure as opposed to
Hmm.
performance, I think that's really key.
Yeah, absolutely. And that pleasure doesn't have to equal climax. There are many ways to feel pleasure within your body. And whether you climax that night or not, whether you can penetrate that night or not, doesn't have to be the end goal as much as just getting that intimate connection and pleasing each other in whatever way you're able to that night or day or whatever.
Absolutely. And, toys, 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 toys,
Hmm.
right? If
Yes.
you are having a hard time, you know, getting it up and this is an ongoing issue, there are such thing as dildos, or
Hmm.
even strap-ons that you can put on and still give that penetration that you want to give to your partner. And so there
Yeah.
are options out there that people can find, to really please their partner and please themselves. The penis still feels pleasure even when it's flaccid. So just because
Hmm.
it's flaccid doesn't mean that it shouldn't get any attention, right? So, really exploring pleasure in so many different ways, I think is something that people need to do as we get older because our bodies do change and that is just a fact of life, right? And so you mentioned erectile dysfunction, and 20% of men in their 20s start to have some form
Hmm.
of erectile dysfunction, but it goes up 10% per decade. So 50% of men in their 50s have some form of erectile
Yep.
dysfunction. It's so common. Does that mean that 50% of the people are going to stop having sex just because of
No.
that? No, it doesn't make sense. You can still experience pleasure. And
Yeah.
so looking at all of the possibilities out there and, shying away from the shame that you may be carrying still from
Mhm.
your upbringing or the church or whatever that may be, and just throwing all of that shame out the window because it is not serving you in your sex life at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the other things that we were going to talk about tonight is kinks and fetishes, which I think
Yes.
goes in right now very well because we're talking about having conversations with your partner. And also goes back to how we were talking about masturbating. You can try some of this stuff yourself, different textures, different pressures, different toys, things like that by yourself, and then introduce it with a partner or have these conversations and do things together. What are some ways that you kind of help people navigate those discussions or suggest for navigating those discussions?
There's a lot of different avenues you can go, um, to sort of introduce something new. I know that a lot of times we look at porn and we think, oh, well, porn is not a good place to like look at educating ourselves about
Mhm,
sexuality. And I 100% agree. But sometimes you may see something on porn that
mhm,
looks really interesting that you might want to try, right? So introducing that to your partner and saying, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of this
mhm,
scene right here? Do you think that you would like to, blindfold me and maybe, tie my arms, up over the door? Would that be something that would turn you on? Because I think it's really hot.
mhm,
Introducing, you can introduce it that way. You can write down like your top three turn ons and share it with each other. Like, what are the three
mhm,
things that turn you on? You can ask very directly, like, do you have any specific kinks that you've never explored? And, let's talk about that because kinks can be very small things like cuddling, right?
Yep.
Or they can be really like over the top things like, BDSM and
Mhm,
bondage and masochism, right? And
yep.
so there's such a huge spectrum. And just because you're kinky doesn't mean that it's going to be, a scary, horrible thing. It can be
Mhm,
a very sensual thing, playing with feathers on your skin, playing
yep,
with ribbons or light flogging can be very
yep.
sensual. So just teasing out what looks interesting to you and then introducing that to the conversation. And really,
Mhm,
if someone says, no, that's not something that I'll ever want to try, that's okay. You
mhm,
were able to express yourself. And maybe there was something in there that they said, yeah, you know what? Why don't we try that next time? So,
mhm,
giving options, it doesn't always have to be just one thing. And really, in the kink world, when you're talking about, say, a Dom and sub
mhm,
relationship, they are constantly talking about sex. Okay. They are
yep,
constantly talking about their wants, their needs, their hard limits, their soft
yep,
limits, what they will do, what they won't do. They have
yep.
safe words, so they are
Mhm,
constantly talking about sex and their desires. And so we can
mhm.
really learn from that community because if we are able to do that in our own relationships, our sex lives will improve.
Absolutely. Yes. I think we have so much to learn from the kink community when it comes to conversations and communication because yeah, it's constant renegotiation, the aftercare where you sit down afterwards, maybe still while you're snuggling and be like, what felt good? What didn't feel good? Okay, hey, I really like spanking, but it went on a little too long and I really actually started to have pain. I didn't really like that. Or I could have gone a little bit harder with that spanking. I could have tolerated a little bit more, something like that. The other thing that I like to tell people is there's so many great online quizzes and things like that now where if you're not even sure how to word some of the things that you might be interested in or something, you can take these quizzes and maybe you and your partner both take a quiz. And at the end, you're like, oh, you liked that? So did I. Oh, I liked this, but you didn't. Tell me why. That alone can spark a really great conversation.
I think that's a great tip. I think taking one of those surveys together, one of those online, yeah, surveys is an amazing idea to share with your partner and to figure out what it is that you really do like because,
Mhm.
there's a lot out there and you may not even know,
Yeah.
and really our sexuality evolves over time. So what you
Hmm.
like now may not be what you like in 5 years or 10 years. It may change. So, having these conversations along the way is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And depending on who else is in your house, right? Like when my kids are super little and had no idea what those noises were, I could do a little bit more. When they're teenagers in the house and they know exactly what those sounds are, you do a little bit less, or when they're not around or whatever. So it might not even just be your own personal interest, but just what you're capable of during those times because of limitations of where you live, who lives with you, whatever, working different shifts, doing something. And so, yeah, not only your personal desires, but your availability and capacity to try different things changes over time too.
100%.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest or funnest kinks that you've kind of heard about, participated in, talked with patients about?
That is a very broad question.
It is very broad. Sorry.
That's okay. I mean, there are many different types of kinks, from like
Yeah.
foot fetishes to, bondage, which is,
Hmm.
getting tied up. I personally find that scary. That's not a kink that I enjoy
Hmm.
because I feel like you need to really trust your partner
Yeah.
in order to let them tie you up and then maybe walk
Yeah.
away. That's
Right.
scary to me, right? But you can blindfolds me all day long because it really does heighten your senses when you're
Hmm.
blindfolded. You focus on everything else, the sounds, the smells, the tastes, the sensations that you're feeling. So that is a really easy kink to
Hmm.
introduce. And you don't necessarily need to even buy a blindfold. You can
Yep.
just, grab a tie or,
Hmm.
the tie of your robe and wrap it around your
Yep.
eyes. And so that's a really fun kink to explore. Impact play. Impact
Mm.
play is another really fun kink that I actually enjoy. And, it can be anything from spanking to impact with objects like
Mhm.
flogs or crops or whips. And really, the sky's the limit. You may like it really gentle and soft. You may like it harder and more shocking. You know, everybody is going to be different in what they enjoy. I personally like being spanked. And I'll tell you what my parameters are so that you can understand how you would want to describe it to your partner,
Yeah.
right? So, this is how I would describe it to my partner. I want it to feel like a shock. Like when it
Mm.
happens, it's a shock. Like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that, but I don't want it to feel painful. So, if it's
Mhm.
too soft, it's not going to shock me. I'm going to be like, didn't do much for me.
Yeah.
It's got to be hard enough to shock me.
Yes.
So that's like one easy way to explain how I would tell a partner how I like to
Yeah.
be spanked. And that would go with other types
Mhm.
of impacts play as well.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the other things that I like to tell people about is you don't have to go and spend a lot of money on things when especially when you're first figuring out what you like and don't like. Go around your house and find stuff. Grab a wooden spoon, grab a fabric cutter or something, that has like some little spikies on it but isn't actually going to cut you. Different little things like that that you can find throughout your house and you can start to figure out what you like and don't like before you go start spending money on fancy floggers and things. I mean, it's easy to grab a silk tie and see whether or not you like the feeling of silk. Feathers are sold at the dollar store. Go see if you like feathers. You can find something more sharp or pointy at the dollar store. Go, or around the house. And I think that is really fun. Maybe you and your partner each go pick three things out of the house and come into the bedroom and figure out whether or not you like them for the night. And there's no pressure because you have no idea and you didn't spend any money on it. I love that idea.
I do too, actually. And it's like what is it called? A something hunt. What's the word I'm looking for?
Treasure hunt? Scavenger hunt?
Treasure hunt, a
Yeah.
scavenger hunt or a treasure hunt.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like
Yes.
a treasure hunt in your home. Like what can you find to, really expand your sensual life
Yeah.
together? And I think that's a really fun idea for partners to kind of incorporate in something that they can do like right now.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it doesn't have to be anything wild or out there. Just, all right, everybody has both of us have 5 minutes, go through the house, pick three things, meet you back in the bedroom. Like, I just think that's such a
Sorry.
fun way to do things. That's all right. And then one of the other things I like besides just doing the quiz is kind of, like repeating it a little bit later and seeing, like, okay, now what has changed? Because, like you said, our wants and our desires do change. And once you start experimenting with some of the kinks and stuff, you might decide that, you know what? I might be a little bit more experimental than I originally thought because I've learned that I can say no, or I can say not so much, just a little bit or whatever. And so now I am open to trying a few more things and seeing what this next step is, this next kink that I really didn't think I was going to be okay with, but now I might be.
Absolutely. I love that. I love being able to sort of expand on that communication, and
Mhm.
when you are able to feel comfortable and your desires and wants and needs are being respected and listened
Mhm.
to, it's going to open you up to even having more in depth conversations in the future and growing your sexual lives together. Because that's what it's all about, really, right? We want more connection, we want more pleasure, we want more love.
Yep.
And, when you are doing this, you are really building that love and that connection even more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, back to what we talked about earlier in regards to like with a flaccid penis, you can still achieve climax with a flaccid penis, whether that's with a hand job or with other toys or with whatever. Just because you can't penetrate doesn't mean you can't still achieve that. Same for women. If I have pain with penetration, go see your pelvic floor physical therapist and work on that. But in the meantime of getting there, you can do clitoral stimulation, nipple stimulation. There are other ways to achieve those pleasure feelings. And so I think really exploring those is so important. And although it's technically considered kink because it's not just straight up missionary, it's maybe safer for some people who haven't explored into the kink world at all to say, "Okay, well, let's just try this little part, and then we can go a little bit more and a little bit more at the more comfortable we are." Those little baby steps I think are huge, especially at the beginning.
And over time, those baby steps become a repertoire of sexual things that you enjoy doing together. And unless you really are exploring and having these conversations, you're going to end up getting into a sexual rut and doing the
Yep,
same exact things each time, the same positions, the same, you know, whatever that may be. And so
yep.
trying to avoid that sexual rut is something that I think is so important because once you're there, it's hard to sort of backtrack. It's really great to be
Mhm.
able, and that's not to say that you can't, right? And
Yeah.
there are plenty of relationships that have been together for a long, long time. And then suddenly, the kids are out of the house and now they have more time together and they want to focus on their
Mhm.
sensual connection. And that's a beautiful thing when both people are on board for that. But
Yeah.
you want to create that relationship throughout your relationship, really,
Mhm.
because sex makes life better.
Yeah.
Good sex makes life better.
Yes. Yes.
And
Much
why,
better.
yeah, why do we want to limit our happiness for so many years? Like
Yeah.
really building this is so important.
Yeah, it really is. And I find that although sex is not all of it in a relationship, it is a huge part of it and it touches all of your aspects of your relationship. And so if you can communicate about sex with your private parts, things you don't tell anybody else, you should damn well be able to talk about the finances, your kids, the job, what you're doing this weekend, and all of those things. And so, I think if you're making effort to improve your intimacy and your sexual connection with each other, you're going to see the rest of your relationship improve as well.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. And I love that everything that you do connects. So you have the pelvic floor physical therapy, you're helping women get bend in that orgasm gap, we're talking about all the various aspects of sex and you cover all of it. I love that.
Thank you. Thank you. I love
Yeah.
talking about big clit energy as well.
Talk to me about that.
Okay, so Big Clit Energy is actually my trademark, and it is the confidence that a woman feels in her sexuality and in her sex life. And when you are confident in that area of your life, that confidence really translates to all areas of your
Mhm.
life, whether it's the boardroom, whether it's, you're having to speak in front of a crowd, whatever that may be, your confidence is going to soar if your sex life confidence is there and if your big clit energy is there. So I love to teach women how to have that big clit energy.
Awesome. Do you have any courses or anything about that?
No, but I am actually developing a card deck. So that's something that's in the works right now.
Awesome. And I'm guessing on your Please Me podcast, you have some episodes about big clit energy?
I have many episodes about big
Okay.
clit energy. I've done tons of webinars about big clit energy. It's something that I think I'm really passionate about because I do feel like women need to gain that confidence. And part of
Yeah.
that is knowing your body, right? And
Yep.
knowing how to orgasm so that you can translate that information to the bedroom. And then, also being able to have these conversations with your partner and communicating. Communication is such a big part of having big clit energy. And then
Yeah.
in the bedroom, exploring, understanding that the bedroom is our adult playground. This is when we get to play. And playtime is fun time. It shouldn't be
Mhm.
serious. It could be funny. It could be silly. It could be awkward. That's
Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
Allowing yourself to have that time to explore and play.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. And with self and with partner, right?
Absolutely, with yourself and with your partner. And I feel like a lot of times when people enter into a relationship, they sort of stop the self
Mhm.
pleasure, right? And stop the masturbation. And we don't need to do that. We should continue to have a relationship with ourselves and with our bodies.
Yep.
Bodies do change. And if you're only having sex once or twice a week, which is common, and that's not a problem, your body can atrophy if you're not using it. Just like any other muscle
Mhm.
in your body, you need to use it or you will lose it. And that goes for
Yes.
penile health, where
Mhm.
penises can shrink, right? Penile
Yep.
shrinkage, or women where we experience vaginal atrophy. So
Yep.
using your parts is extremely important. Use them as
Yes.
much as possible.
Yeah, I absolutely agree for both men and women. Just
Yes.
like you said, I mean, it really does make a difference. I have seen women who come in, they have a new partner, they haven't had sex, they've never used toys, whatever, haven't had sex in maybe 10, 15 years because their previous partner passed away or something. Now they have a new partner, they want to be intimate, tried penetration and so much pain. And you're like, all right, well, so you do an exam and her vagina is the size of a dime. I mean, it's just so tight and it takes a while for them to understand that you have to retrain it. It is a muscle and, well, many muscles, but you have to retrain it and you have to give it the proper nutrients and the proper lubrication and the proper therapy to be able to do that. It's not, don't use it for 15 years and then all of a sudden it's going to work just like it did 15 years ago. And same thing with my guys who are with erectile dysfunction. Maybe it's organic and maybe it's because we just treated them for prostate cancer or something like that. And I tell them all the time, I don't care if you're actually having sex or not, but you need to get an erection at least once a week. Whatever type of an erection you can get, whether you use it for masturbation or not, it is literally exercise. If you're going to go to the gym and do your bicep curls and your bench press, you need to have an erection at least once a week.
Yes, and I would say even once a day, especially for
Yeah.
someone with like erectile dysfunction, right? And
Yeah.
so I do recommend penis pumps,
Yep.
because they do increase the blood flow to the penis and hold it there, the blood in the
Yes.
penis for a certain amount of time. And I recommend
Mhm.
10 minutes per
Yep.
day. These are my patients that come to me. This is part of the protocol that I give them. I give them homework.
Yep. I
And
do
then, of
too.
course, yeah, and then, of course, you have to talk about the hormones. Like, everyone should
Yep.
get their hormones checked because obviously hormones affect our libido. And for
Yes.
women, it affects actually the tissue strength.
Mhm.
And if you don't have enough estrogen, your tissue is going to become papery thin and it's going to feel like
Yep.
there's razor blades down there because you have tiny little micro tears and there's no
Yep.
estrogen to fill in those gaps. You need
Right.
estrogen to have healthy skin in the vaginal area. And so,
Yes.
looking at hormones as well is important, especially as we get older. But even for women who are, post pregnancy, or
Yep.
this is our our
Yes.
hormones as women, right? It goes up, it goes down, it goes
Yep.
up, it goes down. We're always on a roller coaster of hormones, right? And round and round and round and round, right? With our periods. So it's really
Yes.
important to think about your hormones as well. That's just one little
Mhm.
piece of the puzzle. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's amazing how I will have women come in either postpartum or perimenopause, postmenopause, and they say exactly that. I have razor blades when we're having sex, and I'm like, "Oh, you just need some estrogen. Like, let's get you going. I mean, you might need more than that, but we definitely need some estrogen." And they're like, "Well, but I have razor blades." I'm like, "Yeah." and you need estrogen. Like, I promise it's going to make things better. It might not be the only thing we do, but
Right.
it's definitely going to be a highlight of what we do. It is so important. And, for my guys, I'm looking at their testosterone. I'm looking at their total testosterone, their free testosterone. We're looking at all the different sex hormones to make sure that they're balanced right as well. So I absolutely agree. Hormones are a huge part of it. And in the medical community, it's not well enough studied. We are not taught it in school. We have to go and seek extra learning to know these things. So as a patient, it's due diligence for you to find someone who actually knows their shit and can talk to you correctly about hormone replacement therapy.
Absolutely. And I know that for myself, the last couple of years that I asked for hormone replacement therapy, when I went to my gynecologist's office, they were like, well, you're perimenopausal. You're not in menopause yet, so you don't need it. And that's not true. As your
Correct.
hormones decrease over time, you can supplement them because what we want
Yep.
is optimal health. We don't want
Yep.
normal health, right? And normal
Right.
health means that your hormones drop until they're gone, and then
Yes.
you start to
Yes.
treat it then. But what about like the 5 to 10 years of perimenopause that you're
Right.
experiencing these gradual decreases? Why can't we have
Hmm.
optimal health during that time too? So it's a matter
Right.
of finding the correct doctor that's going to look at all of your hormones, all of your labs. And
Hmm.
testosterone is something that's important for women too. And a lot of
Absolutely.
women don't even understand that they are supposed to also supplement testosterone if their testosterone is low. We need all the
Correct.
hormones.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's definitely finding a provider who understands what they're doing, can look through all of your stuff and will individualize your care because you and I could have the exact same lab results and have completely different symptoms and need completely different hormone therapy replacement plans. So it really is getting the right provider that you feel comfortable with, that has the correct education and is willing to put the time into giving you an individualized care plan.
Absolutely. And it can
Yeah.
be frustrating, but don't give
Hmm.
up. See a
Yes.
different doctor. Continue to look for the answers that you're seeking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sexual health is multifactorial, as we have shown today, with conversations and physical therapy and medications and hormones and all of these different parts. So it is a complex, very complex thing that we're dealing with here, but we can all certainly help you and break it down and get you where you need to be. If it's not with me and it's more of a pelvic floor issue, we can get you with that. If it's not a pelvic floor issue, or maybe it is, but you also need some medicine, we can pass each other back and forth. We've got resources for you guys, so we will absolutely be able to help you with that. Thank you so much for being here. I want to give a minute for you to be able to plug your podcast and different things that the audience might want to get in touch with you for. So, floor is yours.
Absolutely. If you want to reach out to me, you can reach me on pleaseme.online. And that is my website. If you want to follow me on any socials, go to the contacts page. All of my social links are there. If you want to reach out to me, send me a message on that contacts page. It goes directly to my email, and I always answer all of my emails. So send me a message there if you want to work with me for health coaching, pleasure coaching I do with couples and singles alike, and pelvic floor therapy. I have a practice in Palm Beach County, Florida, so you can see me in person, or if you want a consultation, of course, I can also do that via Zoom, etc. So reach out to me, and of course, check out my show. My show is a plethora of information regarding sexuality and sexual health. It's a lot of fun. I have lots of guests on my show. I think Dr. Stephanie needs to be on my show
Yeah,
coming
I
up
would love to.
soon. And
Yes.
we had such a great conversation here. I know we'll have a great
Yes.
conversation there as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yes, I will reiterate all of that in the show notes. So we will have the links and everything in there for you. Definitely go and subscribe to her podcast because the more we get this message out there for everyone, the better. And we need to keep her at number one. If she's at number one right now, we got to stay there.
Yes, thank you. That was exciting news. And I'm still celebrating.
As you should be, as you should be. That's amazing. Thank you again so much for being here. Everybody have a great week and go have some fun between the sheets. Thank you for joining us and exploring sexual health topics here on Between the Sheets. New episodes are available every Wednesday. Please subscribe and rate our podcast so we can reach more listeners. And don't forget to tell your friends, partners, and anyone who will listen about Between the Sheets. Send any comments, questions, or stories to podcastbetweenthesheets@gmail.com. It's all one word, podcastbetweenthe sheets@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and go have some fun between the sheets.